May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Well, despite the fact that we still have a few poinsettias left, Christmas is over, and now it is the season of Epiphany. We've taken down the Christmas trees, put away the ornaments, and finished our telling of the stories about a baby in a manger. Now, with Epiphany, the story really begins. The story that is meant to make a difference in your life and mine. Over the season of Epiphany, we will hear stories that focus our attention on ways that Jesus makes known both the character of God and God's intent for how human life should be lived. And we always start the season of Epiphany with the story that we heard this morning from the Gospel of Matthew, the story of Jesus' baptism. Well, we start the Sunday. It starts Epiphany that way. Because if you had been here on Tuesday night, the night we had the healing service, on the eve of the Feast of Epiphany, which is January 6th, we would have started with the story of the three wise men, or the three kings that the choir will sing about. But even that closes out that Christmas season. And this morning, what we start with is this story of Jesus' baptism and the proclamation that this Jesus is the one who had been looked for, that this Jesus is the one who is to be followed. In one way or another, the same story of Jesus' baptism is told in all four Gospels. The Gospel of Mark and Luke seem to tie it more to a personal experience that Jesus had, saying, "You are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased." Matthew tweaks it a bit. He tells it as a proclamation to everybody, "This is my beloved Son, the one in whom I am well pleased." And John has John the Baptist tell about it instead of having it unfold. So at least three different ways of telling the same story, but all of them with the same purpose: to proclaim Jesus, Son of God, to make that proclamation before the rest of the story begins to unfold. And this Son of God, this title, it was a designation that for Hebrews in first century Palestine was one that was usually used to refer to the one who had been anointed by God as king. It's what David was called when he was anointed, the Son of God, the beloved king, anointed by God to rule an undivided kingdom. It meant that the person who had been anointed had been especially chosen by God to lead God's people, and that the people therefore needed to pay attention to him. That's what it meant in first century Palestine. The phrase, of course, through generations of Christian devotion and thought and theology and teaching, the phrase Son of God, of course, for us as Christians has come to mean much more than that. What it means for Christians, to borrow some words from one of my favorite theologians, Marcus Borg, is this. He puts it in a concise sentence. What it means for Christians is that Jesus is for us, for Christians, the decisive revelation of God. Jesus reveals and discloses everything that can be seen of God. And he does it in a human life. And also in that human life, he shows us what a human life filled with God is supposed to look like. This is the center around which Christianity exists. That in Jesus we see both what God is like and also what humankind is intended to be. So the Gospels start the meat of the story here with this bold statement about Jesus as the one who has been anointed, empowered to do just that. And we have continued to tell that story. as a story of the one who fully embodies all that God is and all that we are intended to be. That is to say, that the Gospels start us off by assuring us that Jesus really is the one we're supposed to be paying attention to, just in case we get confused as the story unfolds. Because as the story unfolds, there are going to be times in the telling of the story of Jesus that we're going to wonder if he really is the one or not. When he's mocked and rejected, when people don't understand him, when his own family thinks he's gone insane, when all these things happen, it would be easy for us, if we were just following the story without thousands of generations of teaching behind it, to wonder if perhaps we hadn't started following the wrong God. And so the gospel writers want us to get it right from the beginning, that regardless of what it looks like as this story unfolds, this is the one. This is the one we're supposed to pay attention to. And the focus in the Gospels, as the story unfolds, is to show us a particular way of being in the world. We are to focus on that way. We are to follow Jesus in that way. And we are to trust that Jesus, A, knows how to get us there, and B, has the power to get us there. That's supposed to be the focus as the story unfolds. The problem, however, is that we lose the focus. We believe the statement, most of us do, in one way or another, that Jesus is the Son of God, however we decide to understand that. We believe that Jesus is at one with God, the one to listen to. But the part about following a certain way gets to be a bit fuzzy as we try to do that in our own lives. There are lots of reasons that we lose that focus. One being, of course, there are lots of different ways that people are just greatly willing to tell us is the way we should follow. But for 20th and 21st century Christians, there's an additional obstacle in our way to living according to the way that Jesus shows. And that obstacle is quite often belief itself. Because in the world we know, the very concept of the word belief has taken on an entirely different connotation than what it meant in ancient times. In our time, we have come to think of belief in terms of agreeing that certain claims about something or somebody are true. For example, I believe that St. Andrew's is an Episcopal church. It's something I believe about St. Andrew's. I believe that many people who go to St. Andrew's live in Fayette County. Many, not all. That is something I believe about St. Andrew's. I believe that St. Andrew's is located on State Route 41, southwest, next to the Washington Country Club. That's something I believe about St. Andrew's. And all of these beliefs about St. Andrew's can be verified. They can be verified by checking certain facts, certain records. I can check with the Diocese of Southern Ohio to make sure that St. Andrew's is in fact an Episcopal church. I can check church records, hopefully, to verify what counties, which families live in. I can look in the phone book or just drive myself down State Route 41 Southwest to know for sure that where I believe St. Andrew's to be located is really where it is located. Because these verifiable facts are what belief has been reduced to in the 20th and 21st centuries, we tend to translate this idea of belief to religious beliefs as well. So in the case of being Christian, or choosing not to be Christian in the 20th and now 21st century, belief has often come down to a focus on whether we believe certain things to be true about Jesus or not. And the result of that, the result of minimizing belief in this way, is this. Those who choose not to be Christian believe that whatever claims they've heard about Jesus are not true and cannot be verified. And we who choose to be Christian tend to believe that whatever claims our particular faith community makes about Jesus are the correct claims to be believed, and we verify those claims according to our own particular approach and beliefs about the Bible. So when we hear scriptural passages like today's from Matthew, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased," it's easy to let our focus become one of figuring out where we stand on beliefs about that statement. It leads to questions like these. What does it mean for God to call Jesus his Son? When did Jesus become God's Son? How is Jesus God's Son? And so forth, through generations of theology that have tried to find answers to those questions. But what's important here for us this morning? What's important is for us to realize how far this focus, a focus on what we believe about Jesus, how far it is from the focus that the gospel writers were trying to point us to. They were more interested in our believing what Jesus showed us, and our believing Jesus's showing of what God is like, and our believing in what Jesus showed us as the way to live a life that really is an abundant life. You see, when belief becomes nothing more than whether or not we agree with the truth of claims about Jesus, we lose the focus of Jesus himself. You see, it's only, though, in the last 300 to 400 years that the concept of belief has become so reduced. Only in the last 300 to 400 years that belief has come only to mean intellectual agreement with certain claims. Only in what's been called the modern age of enlightenment that belief has become talk about what we believe to be or not to be true. There's a much, much older understanding of belief. We still see traces of it in some of our language today when we talk about believing in somebody, because this belief isn't about believing that something exists. It's about believing in something, about trusting something, and it leads to a whole different kind of questions. It leads us to shift our focus. It's different if we talk about believing in St. Andrew's, for example, because then we have to ask a whole different set of questions. It's not so important what street we're on, where our address is, whether we're an Episcopal church or not. It's not so important what we believe about this place, but do we believe in it? Do we believe in it as an active agent of the power of God's love and goodness and compassion in this world? Do we believe in God working through St. Andrew's to make all welcome? Do we believe in God working through St. Andrew's to grow people's relationships with God and self and others and all creation? Do we believe in God working through St. Andrew's to minister to this community of Washington Courthouse and the surrounding areas? These are kinds of questions that focus on us on action, on a way of being in the world regardless of what we believe to be true about St. Andrew's. And it's these same kinds of belief questions that we begin to discover for ourselves when we start talking about believing in Jesus, believing in the testimony of what Jesus showed and how he showed us to be in the world, as opposed to just arguing over what we believe about Jesus. Because believing in the way that Jesus shows focuses our attention both on the compassionate goodness of God and on the way our lives look when we're filled with God, even if that's different from the way we and everybody else always thought our lives should look. That focus, my friends, really can make a difference in your life and in mine. And in the end, it's that kind of focus that will lead us to many, many epiphanies. May we begin this journey through this Epiphany season, believing in what Jesus has shown.